Hey everyone, it's Classic DM and welcome back. This video series is going to focus on Pathfinder Second Edition at kind of the 1 year mark. And this video is really designed for people who are thinking about playing the game. Maybe you come from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe you're an old school advanced Dungeons and Dragons player or played 3.5 and you've heard about Pathfinder Second Edition. It's been out since August of 2019. And I'm kind of a content creator in YouTube. I make a lot of AD&D videos, and I've made tons of Pathfinder Second Edition videos. And so I thought I would take a step back and go, okay, it's a year later. There's a huge influx of new people coming to the game, and I've learned a lot in the last year. And I want to kind of share with you tips, ideas, give you my evaluation of what the strengths of the game system is, the weaknesses, how to dive into it. Because you're going to find that if you just jump into a Facebook group or try to jump into a game and you surround yourself with a lot of players who are very experienced with the game, you're going to find yourself very overwhelmed. So you take a step back and enjoy this video, and we'll take a look at all the different types of details and small digestible pieces about the game. So let's just go ahead and take a look here. So, if you're going to do anything, you have to get the core rule book. This is what it looks like in a printed format. It is only like $14 in PDF. I recommend you start there. You can read it on your phone. You can read it on your laptop. It's got bookmarks. It's fantastic. If you like having a book, the book hasn't really come down in price. You can maybe get it on Amazon. The thing about the core rulebook to me that is really nicely done is how well organized it is. It is really organized in a way to introduce you step by step into the major concepts of the game. In fact, let's get the bestiary and other stuff on the table out of the way here first. Let's get this a little cleaner so you can see this better. So this is like your typical monster manual, right? And of course, Paizo has some of the pre-generated characters. Those come in handy when you're trying to figure out like what kind of character class you want to try to build, what ancestry, what background. And let's just get this up here for you. So I'm not going to read you the book, but I'm going to walk you through why I think it's a really great core rule book, and it served a lot of people really well. Now, there's also the online archives of Nethys. I may have mispronounced that. That's been around forever since Pathfinder 1 that has all the rules for free on the internet, but it's a searchable database. So if you're trying to find out like stride versus strike, or you're trying to figure out how stealth works, you can type in a keyword and it'll bring up like hundreds of entries that have the keyword stealth in it, right? Or cover, the cover mechanic. Pathfinder Second Edition has a cover mechanic. So you may find that as you get more advanced and you've read the rules and you've asked your question on a Facebook group or something like that, or maybe on Discord channel, or maybe on Reddit, you can't find the answer, or you're real motivated to find your own answers, you may find the archives of Nethys to be super handy for digging up details. But if you're new to the game, you're not really going to start there. You're not going to go to the website. It's not presented in a way to teach you the rules. The book is. The book does a really, really, really good job of doing that. So I'm not going to go chapter by chapter of the book just yet. But let's wind it back a second. So who are you? You're someone thinking about playing the game. You maybe heard about it from a friend. It looks pretty cool. You've seen some of the stuff in the videos online. There's lots of YouTube content creators who make, almost like college level course lectures on how to do all the rules. There's people like me that make all kinds of crazy stuff. There's people that do lots of live play sessions. It's a huge gamut of stuff. It doesn't have that 6-year history that 5th edition D&D does, but it also doesn't really have a lot of this live play kind of silliness that's kind of overtaken the Twitch streams for D&D. So Pathfinder Second Edition, because of its complexity, its lethality, its true emphasis on character builds, it kind of brings in some MMO players. It brings in some hardcore 3.5 players who are used to building dual-wielding rapier weapon masters with monk, things like that. People who really enjoy the true, gritty, smart mechanics. Someone who understands synergies in a game like Diablo 3. Someone who wants to put together a character that's very creative, that does something very, very different. And it's going to be balanced. So unlike a lot of games where you can make a bad character, you can make a weak character and make poor choices, which is one of the problems with 3.5 in AD&D. If you make the wrong feat choices and the wrong skill emphasis, and you aren't finesse, two-weapon fighter, and you end up with a great sword, and you're just not going to be optimized. So Pathfinder, I can tell you from play sessions, which I have videos on the channel here of live play sessions with players from around the world, it's very well balanced. You can build some wacky builds, and they will be balanced. Because of all this normalization from the character creation perspective, with all the different characters and classes you can play, which you can go in the book and take a look through all the different types of classes that there are. There's a really nice spread in here in the first chapter. You're going to find that it's really hard for you to make a character that sucks. You're going to find, but at the same time, that the characters that you create aren't going to be generic. They're very specialized. They're going to have a lot of elements, like a cleric. They're going to have lots of choices that you can make along the way, so you can breathe in your personal kind of concept, and it can be a really wild concept. There's lots of different ways to multi-class, essentially, that are really, really interesting as well. It's a really strong game. The mechanics, the system design behind the scenes of the guys at Paizo who designed and assembled this game have done a brilliant job of making a game that leverages the fantastic mythology of their franchise, which is the Galarian world, the Inner Sea especially. All the Pathfinder 1 content is still applicable. More on that later. Okay. The world they haven't done a little Magic the Gathering and a little Greyhawk and a little Forgotten Realms, a little Eberron. They've been focused, and they've been focused fired on the Galarian Inner Sea world. So all their adventure paths, the story, the chronological history of the world, it is the same since what, 2007 or something like that? Is that when it first came out? Someone correct me with a comment about that. It's the same world, and it's just 10 years later. So because of that, you're stepping into someone else's Netflix series with 5,000 episodes. You're stepping into an already built franchise. It's like getting into Batman and Superman comics when there's already 90 years of content for this stuff. So that's really cool because you're going to find that there is an unaffordable quantity of usable content. And one thing a lot of people they take for granted is they don't understand that there is so much Pathfinder 1 battle maps, map tiles, adventures. I call them modules because I'm so old school. Adventures, adventure paths, dungeons, source books. You can get them all in PDF format. There's so many of these things that if you just replace the stat block on the enemies, the stories and everything, they're really, really, really good. They're so much better. They're, in personal opinion, they're so much better than what you see from Wizards of the Coast. A little bit of criticism against them. When they did 5th edition, they really reinvigorated D&D to get away from what happened in 4th edition, and they brought back kind of the old classic AD&D 1st edition vibe with some of the mechanics you kind of loved in 3.5, but not going down the route of goofy grapple systems. They went to this kind of opposing role mechanic and things like that. So what they've done is they kind of introduced a new generation to some of these classic themes, like Against the Giants or the Drow, or all these classic TSR modules that have been there forever. And they reimagined them all and released them all as very expensive hardbacks. And they've developed the storyline season where every 3 or 4 months there's a brand new story in the world and everyone's playing it. And it's interesting, but it's kind of like dipping into Dad's pockets and stealing some pennies out of his wallet. It doesn't have the same level of originality. It's almost like it's like Brady Bunch episodes in the year 2020, and nothing to take away from what they're doing. They're a successful business, but they're also a business that focuses on Magic the Gathering and printing board games and making video shows. And so they're not just making 1 or 2 role-playing game systems like Paizo is. And Paizo is a book publisher. So their goal is to write, and create content. The thing that they've done really, really well with Pathfinder Second Edition is write content tailored towards you, the player. Now, there is lots of Game Master / Dungeon Master content. That's great. But because of the flexibility and the fact that they can create another book like the Advanced Player's Guide, and they can create heritages, and they can create more things you can do with your character and new skills and feats and disciplines and things like that to pick up in a new area of the world by just going to a new desert region. There could be new magic items or new classes. That is just going to be overwhelming for you in the beginning. Now, that's all sounds super positive, but when you first dive in, if you come to the table and have this really kind of wacky idea of, you want to build a goblin alchemist or whatever, or you want to build a sorcerer, you need to get the P2E Path Builder app. I think it's only on Android. I personally think that is the best way in the whole world to start, because it is a brilliant tool the guy who makes it on Patreon. It's a free app. You can download off the Google App Store. If you're using an Apple phone, I'm sorry to hear that. If it looks like this, right? So you have this brilliant app. I'll bring it up a little closer. Brilliant app. Make a new character. You just start, hey, or make a fighter. We're going to create the fighter. It tells you the details behind it. You just start building the character. Level 1, you got to do 4 ability boosts, 1 class skill training. You pick your heritage. I'm going to go for, what did we say a minute ago? Let's go for a versatile heritage. So, I can spend 3 hours dabbling with this, and then you can export these as PDFs and email them to yourself at the end. Change the level, reduce the skills, check the defense, check the offense. So when it comes time to build a character, this tool is just infinitely valuable. So you can do things where, like, okay, download the community use package where the people that have been in the Pathfinder Society have built the classic iconic characters like Mauricio or Kira, Kyra, or Harsk, Sajin, Sela, all these characters I printed up on some cardstock, double-sided for fun, Ezran the Wizard, and you can take a look at how were they built by the community and see some of the choices and then challenge yourself on, like, well, how does this spell attack DC 17 is +7? What does that really mean? And then you can go back into the core rulebook and reverse engineer it. In fact, I did a video where we reverse engineered the fighter Valeros just at a very simplistic level, and it was a good exercise for me to do to teach myself, like, how do you build a character. But if you use the phone app, which is not supported by Paizo at all, that's a great way to do it. There is a online character builder, but it costs money. Why would you want to do that? The app has some advertisements at the bottom. It's so much easier to use. If you go and look at our live show series on the YouTube channel, you'll find about 4 episodes. They're live, real-time conversations with myself and other game masters who we talk about the game, we talk about mechanics, we talk about how it's fun, we talk about how we mitigate certain situations, and we actually have one of the guys running an original adventure for us in Piran's Bluff, which is quite fun. And this is all right when the whole COVID thing happened in April. And if you ever got the patience to listen to a live play session, that one's very interesting because we were talking about mechanics and playing the game at the same time. And we built characters. We built, all of us built 5 really wacky sorcerers using, like, the Advanced Player's Guide, the Lost Omen World Guide. So if you dive in too fast, you're going to get a little confused. Approach it like this. This is essentially Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in a modern era with a much more flexible class and race, which is called heritage, ancestry, or whatever. A much more flexible system for you to create the character you've always dreamed of, as opposed to making, like, a gnome illusionist like in AD&D, and that's pretty much going to be it. So there's so much emphasis on you, the player, to be able to create, you want to make this dwarf fighter, you want to have this spiked shield and use a hatchet, and you want to put little things in a shield to bash people with, and you want him to have mail armor and a big red beard and a crazy helmet and be high AC. Even if you build him, okay, and you also decide to build some kind of war priest cleric, but you're going to use a shield and a morning star, and you're going to find that your melee effectiveness is almost the same. Your AC numbers end up being almost the same. Your ability boosts and ability modifiers are almost the same. The subtle differences between the two, now you're not exactly the same. There are subtle differences, but the things that he can do, his active abilities, are very different than her active abilities. And that's where your creativity comes in mind, because your creativity to determine what to do on the battlefield is where you're going to have an incredible amount of fun by playing the character the way you want to do. And like I was showing you a moment ago in the phone app, when you get ready to play the character, well, guess what you're doing? You're picking all the feats and the spells and the abilities, all the different, like Arcane Bond, on our Bargain Hunter, Cooperative Nature, Reach spells, so you have a further range for your spells. You're thinking in your mind, like, I want to build a sorcerer that has a strength-based sorcerer, uses a spear to trip people 10 feet away, has intimidation as all their skill emphasis, is a human, comes from like a guard mercenary background, is fantastic at CCing people and then nuking them into oblivion with one spell, and can blind people at range, and can intimidate from range. Like, these really crazy builds. And having that phone app is going to be a great way to figure out how to do that. Now, here's the thing you have to be careful with. A lot of people will dive into a play session, and I did that as well. And there are some rules. Now we're going to talk about weaknesses a little bit here. there are some rules in this system that I can't figure out. They just don't connect with me. If you've ever seen an interview with Ian Gillan when he talks about when he joined Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi to come sing from them after being Deep Purple for so long, he just couldn't get the lyrics to Iron Man right. It just didn't make any sense to him. It was a completely different world. If you come from other tabletop role playing games, when you start looking at things like stealth and you're like, wait a minute, I'm used to backstab from AD&D, I'm used to spot and move silently and hiding, I'm not used to this weird cover mechanic where I have to go hide behind a rock first and then sneak around because it's not really invisibility. And you find that there's some core elements that affect how you play that you may have trouble wrapping your head around it. Another thing to think about, if you come from 5th edition, this is a 3-action economy game. And a 3-action economy game means you have 3 moves basically you can do. Some moves cost more than 1 action point to do it, but you can like move and cast a spell or move and take a melee attack and then move back. So everything is broken down into these costs. Like think of them as bullets in your gun. And you also have things called reactions where like if someone does something to you, you get this free reaction. Have you ever heard the word riposte? You know anything about sword fighting and fencing? You know, someone takes a swing at you, you can riposte. If you played EverQuest 1, you know what it's like to get riposted if you're on the wrong side of the enemy. So, and you have situations that are called free actions. So doing things like aiding another player or, you know, using a medicine skill between battles to heal someone up, how you decide to move, the removal of a lot of attack of opportunity for everybody. So, and the movement distances that you are doing in Pathfinder, I mean, they are like, the speed values are huge. So for example, let's put the druid here, let's put this monk here, and we'll put, let's put an enemy up here. Let's say this crazy caster is up here by this campfire. You know, when it's this person's turn, you know, he can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a first action, 25 foot of speed. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, his second action. And then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's like 75 feet of movement, counting those diagonal squares as 2. Look how close he can get in 1 6-second segment at running at full speed. And so the movement rate of the characters are going to make a big difference. You're going to find the range of some of the spells to be like from here all the way over to here. This is an 18 by 24 board, that the range of some of these spells, if there was a line of sight from here to here, you're like, oh my goodness. You may find situations where, okay, let's look at this map here from the Indigo Oasis. We say we got the monk and the druid and we got a fighter in the front row, and we've got a couple dual wielding little baddies here fighting in the front. You may find the positioning doesn't make as much difference, with the exception of how you make a trace between an enemy and whether you're flanking them or not. And the rules may be like, okay, am I flanking here? I'm not flanking. I don't really get it. There's a lot of little miniature-based positioning mechanics which can be a little tricky to figure out. I got some videos on that kind of stuff to explain it, and there's some other YouTube creators who have like lectures that explain it, where they basically just kind of read to you in the rule book, like how does it work, to explain it. So use the YouTube community to help you understand the technicalities of hardness of shields and all these kind of weird things. That to me is the biggest strength and weakness simultaneously of the game. Easy to learn, hard to master. How many times have we heard that stupid, cheesy Dota 2 type statement? So when you get into the game, you're like, wow, look at this big world. Look at these really cool character builds. I can't wait to play. You know, I got a free adventure of the Indigo Oasis. Go download it and play it with your friends. Go grab the free module that Paizo released. It's like a 7-page PDF. There are adventure paths you can play with your friends, right? You don't need a lot of people to play. You can just play with 2 people. So, I mean, it can be a game master or 1 player playing 2 characters if you want to. Start trying to play, but don't worry if you can't figure out all the rules in the first year. There's very few people, even right now, in the Pathfinder 2E Facebook group and the Pathfinder 2E-fan group. Those are the 2 go-to Facebook groups that can clearly answer every single question every time, with the exception of like 4 people. I've been a member of those groups on again, off again over time because I don't like my Facebook feed clogged up. But the Pathfinder Second Edition group and the Pathfinder Second Edition 2 group, 2E fan group, those are the really, really good ones. In fact, I'll just give you a quick example right here. Besides all the podcast spam, here's one. If a character is blinded in the middle of combat, an opponent was observed, which is like a state, immediately before this happened, then the opponent moves to the character's threatened square. Can he take an attack of opportunity? Reruled at the moment as if the opponent had become hidden, requiring a DC of 11, a flat check, or attempt to strike, which is like a melee attack. Anyone know an official ruling on this? Hidden, I mean edit, not invisible. So you have all these answers. Okay, all these people answer, but Nathan Fish is really good at answering questions. All these different answers from everyone, and you will find a lot of them are wrong, and you won't know. But if you engage in this kind of community, you're going to find that you have other people who are still, over a year later, trying to interpret the rules. That can be tough. If you were to go try and play EverQuest 1 today, you would be lost. If you weren't there when it first came out, you will not know what's going on. It's not a theme park like World of Warcraft. In many ways, Pathfinder 2E can become extremely technical very, very quickly. Don't let that ruin your idea of trying the game out. Don't be upset if you can't figure it out. Don't be upset if you change a certain ruling to keep the game moving. You can go back later and read about the rule. You can go back later and learn how to do it. No one jumps into a race car and wins the Formula One race the first weekend. It's a hobby. Have fun learning the hobby. Try the game out. You'll find that it's extremely fun. The lethality and the tactical level of it is really scary. In fact, in some ways, the combat takes longer because it is so scary and people are more careful and they have to make very serious, almost chessboard moves of where to go and what to do next. And they find that their build that they were imagining doing kind of is put in a bad bind. Your player choices end up creating hard battlefield choices if you play with a battle map. But that's a good thing because the game's always interesting. You can replay the same battle with two friends over and over and over, just like playing chess, and it will never be the same ever. But if you come in there and charge forward like a dingbat, you're going to get slaughtered. And that's because all these multiple attacks with a 3-action economy. I mean, let's just simplify that real quick, right? Let's say this, let's just put this dwarf fighter guy up here, right? Dwarf fighter, going to get in the face of a bad girl magic caster, say she's a sorcerer. And he has a multiple attack penalty. He can attack 3 times with his little tomahawk here, right? Or his battle axe. First attack, no penalty. Second time he attacks in the same melee round, right? -5 to hit. Third time, -10 to hit. Now there's some feats and things he can do to change that, but just at a basic core concept, the multiple attack penalty in his turn, he could end up hitting her 3 times and go chop, 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 and she's taking 35, 40 points of damage. She's just dead. Now the health bars of the characters are higher too. Not health bars, but the hit points are higher. The armor class is pretty much extremely well balanced. How those multiple attack penalties, the way they're going to make it harder for him to hit on that second, third hit, kind of mean a very dramatic moment happens if he lands all 3 or even 2 hits. So he might consider doing something else. That's why your feat choices and how you control your character, you're not just a whack-a-mole type of melee fighter anymore. What she decides to do when he's in her face. So those things, as you learn and play more and more and more, you're going to find that like you've been playing for a year and you still don't have it all figured out yet. The only other thing I would recommend for you to do is if you're going to buy anything, say like I suggest to buy the PDF version of the core rule book, right? Don't steal it, buy it, because people slaved on that thing for years. Don't ever steal stuff from the internet. Be cool. Don't be an idiot. Get a legit copy. It's worth it, right? Is to get a copy of the Dungeon Master screen, which I'm going to pull up for you here, which folds funny. So the GM screen, yes, it doesn't like to fold the way I like to hold it. So let's just do it this way. So this, you probably saw it in the background. This is this GM screen. It's this massive, big, laminated, continuous piece of beautiful artwork for a game master. It's wonderful. The inside of it is like the world's greatest cheat sheet for all the DCs, the skill actions, like how does medicine work, and lore and intimidation, diplomacy. How does cover work? If you can, you can make a 2-hour YouTube video on every one of these little text blocks. So everything in the core rule book, even the conditions, which are like debuffs. If you ever played Guild Wars 2, you see conditions like bleed, fire, vulnerability, etc. What is a broken condition versus drain versus deafen versus confused versus persistent damage. The little GMs, what the hell you want to call this thing? GM screen. It's really, really good. It's super duper useful. And of course it folds up if you're not a dummy like me into something really cool looking. So In summary, because I don't want this to get too long, we're already at like what, the 24-minute mark. In summary, there's a lot of wonderful strength here. There is a lot of complexity. And if you wade in too quick, and if you don't like complexity, you may become lost. You may feel like, well, I don't really know how to play. And you're going to have to find someone to help you. And you're going to have to learn together with your friends and pretend you're playing something complex. But if you don't get it right, don't let that dissuade you. Last thing I want to talk about on this video was leveraging existing content to have fun. So if you get the Pathfinder 2e rulebook and you get the bestiary, right, which has all the monsters in it, and there's even a second bestiary, they're just going to keep releasing these things. You saw it in Pathfinder 1, they got the drow, they got everything else in here. All these dragons and all the monsters and all their stat blocks and how they work and what their actions are and all this kind of crap. You got to every game has this. This is not new, right? This is not new to anyone. You can take any D&D adventure, any second edition adventure. You could take The Secret of Bonehell, The Village of Hamlet. You can take The Temple of Elemental Evil. You can take something from 3.5. You can take anything from Pathfinder 1 and just replace the enemies. You just keep the story, keep the map, keep the locations. The level ranges may change, right? But the Bestiary Guide is really, really good at breaking everything down by what their levels are. So, if you want to get a sense of what level something is, level 3, Sea Hag, Skeleton Knight, Snapping Flytrap, Sod Hound, Tiefling. These things are broken down by creatures by level. Even starts with -1 and goes to 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're making an adventure. You're like, I want to make an adventure that's got, Darrow Magisters and Deep Gnomes in it. Well, those are 5. And then in the core rulebook, it talks you about how to balance those things. So one thing I find very tricky is that people jump in a new game and they don't realize that there's a massive library of all this cool stuff that you can use. And it doesn't really take much work just to say, well, I'm taking these hill giants out and I'm replacing them with centaurs. And I think it'd be great level 4, 5, and 6 adventure with a bunch of level 3 baddies in there, and there's 20 of them. So don't limit yourself. You can even take your 5th edition D&D stuff and just replace it. I mean, this thing is essentially the open game license. This is basically 3.5 D&D reinvented with a core mechanic. So it's not like you're that far off. Everyone knows what a mimic is. Everyone knows what lizard folk is. Everyone knows what drow are. Everyone knows what kobolds and ettins are. There's no real surprises in here. There's nothing here you haven't seen the Dragon magazine 40 years ago. So take advantage of that. Play with your friends. Give it a whirl. Try out my Indigo Oasis adventure if you want something very lighthearted. If you're playing with your children, or playing with someone who's never played an RPG before, it's very easy for people to understand. And have fun with it. And join those Facebook groups and ask questions. You'll find that those 2 Facebook groups, I'll put a link in the description, they are very, very helpful for answering technical questions. And even giving advices and tips on how to rule things. All right, so 1 year later, playing the game, analyzing the game, making videos for the game, and you are thinking about getting into it, that's what you're getting into. You're getting into something that's going to be around for 10 years or more. All right, we'll talk to you later. Have a great night. We'll see you soon, and hope you stay safe with COVID-19 still out there.